stories produced through the District 6 Museum podcast series and the opinions and statements that may be contained herein do not reflect those of the District 6 Museum, but rather the individuals hosted within this series. The audio snippets used in this podcast are taken from the Mellon Foundation Oral History Project and can be found in the District 6 Museum archive. Welcome to the District 6 Museum Vusalela Ons Luister podcast series. In this episode, we have a very special story for you. A story about love, secrecy, and defiance in the face of great adversity. Today, we introduce you to Maureen Gallon and her husband Gino. Maureen and Gino celebrated their 44th wedding anniversary this year. But let's go back to the year Maureen and Gino met.
I met my husband when I was very young. I was about 17 or 18 at the time. I didn't have any boyfriends. My parents were very, very strict. They were Catholic and we grew up. The only thing we did was go to school in the morning and go to the Holy Cross Convent School, and we went to church and we went to confession. Confession was a way of opening up and telling, the priest everything that you did wrong. Those days you were rude, whatever, everything. Anyway, to continue, I met my husband. My father brought my husband home to come and have a meal. And I looked at him, and of course, my first thought was, could Dad not have chosen someone better? My idea of the perfect man was tall, and my husband was short. I mean, he's just a little bit taller than what I am, and he's Italian. So I was expecting this beautiful, clipped British accent voice. And what did I get? I got this man for, the first time we went out, my dad wanted to buy a car, and he took me for a drive, and he stopped and said, "Give me a little kiss." I was totally outraged. I mean, who did this man think he was? I was sitting there and I thought, is he mad? A little kiss.
Maureen met Gino at a time in South Africa's history where apartheid laws, specifically the Mixed Marriages Act and the Immorality Act, prohibited relationships between white people and people of color, very much like the relationship Maureen and Gino share. Maureen and Gino defied the law. They defied societal norms of the day, and in 1977, they got married.
I got married in the Catholic Church, and it was a priest who, we got married at about 7 o'clock, and it was locked doors in the church, and it was the, what was the church's name? It was in Athlone, in Lawrence Road, Athlone, and we had to, St. Mary of the, it'll come to me. But anyway, I remember I got dressed in the sacristy, where the priest, the priest's home was quite close by, and then walked through, and it was all very secret, because if the security board caught us, I'd be imprisoned.
Yeah.
So everything was done behind locked doors, and the church was full, and everybody was quiet. And I couldn't understand why this Catholic priest, who I knew quite well, poor dear Father Rufino, why he gave us a nuptial mass. A nuptial mass goes on for over an hour, which is the full mass, and it's not just that, okay, you take this one. No. He had the sermon prepared, he had everything prepared, and it was full on. And I was thinking, hurry up, we never know when this is going to... He couldn't be bothered about that. This was going to be his moment when he gave us a proper marriage ceremony. And my husband, a few of his friends had come along, and they were not at all frightened. They thought this was just so nice. They were all taking part in this sort of, they were being naughty in a sense. They were all breaking the law.
The prohibition of the Mixed Marriages Act of 1949 was among one of the first pieces of apartheid legislation that was passed and implemented following the National Party's rise to power in 1948. As part of the apartheid government's overall policy of separateness, the Mixed Marriages Act was officially implemented in 1951, and police officers were responsible for the enforcement of this law. It was often the case that police officers followed people home to ensure they were not in violation of the law, and raided the homes of those who they believed were in a mixed marriage. The punishment for people who were in a mixed marriage often involved arrest and jail time. But aside from the legal consequences of violating the Mixed Marriages Act, people were also socially ostracized and ridiculed by their friends, their family, and their fellow community members.
And from there we went home to my parents' home. The nice thing about going to my parents had everyone there. We had the entire family there. And, it was very much sort of make a big pot of food and big curries and whatever, and all the family, and they were all dressed to the nines at night time. And I'm so happy I've got these photographs. I didn't have many photographs of us getting married, because those photographs could have had me imprisoned.
After getting married, Maureen and Gino moved to Greenpoint. But the secrecy of their relationship and the constant fear of getting caught never left their minds.
What I would do every evening was make up a bed in the lounge. So a blanket would be there and the pillow.
So they would literally come and knock on the door.
If they came to knock, I would be lying in that bed. But then I discovered afterwards that they were actually feeling the bed to see if it was warm. If you just jumped out of that bed or you jumped out of the other. So you played musical chairs with the beds. But for the most part, I must say that the neighbors that I had around me, they were very good. Good sounds patronizing and condescending, but they were very accepting. They were not horrible towards me. They never ever treated me like, you shouldn't be here.
As Maureen relives the story of her wedding day to Ayanda Mpono, interviewer for the District 6 Museum, we hear her laugh. But can you imagine getting married in secret, knowing you are breaking the law, waiting for police to break down the church doors, and having no wedding photos to look back to? While this remains a story of how apartheid laws affected people in very real ways, it is also a story of the life that two ordinary people shared. It is a story of strength and resilience. It is a story of love that knows no bounds. Thank you for listening, and please stay tuned for another episode in the District 6 Museum Vuselela Ons Luister podcast series. The audio snippets used in this podcast are taken from the Mellon Foundation Oral History Projects archive. The stories produced through this podcast series and the opinions and statements that may be contained herein do not reflect those of the District 6 Museum, but rather the individuals hosted within this series.